To the massive earthquake that woke up Alaska, sparking tsunami alerts all along Alaska, the Pacific coast, the entire west coast of the U.S. In Kodiak, Alaska, people rushing to higher ground. You can see the traffic jam in the middle of the night. Those tsunami fears stretched all the way to Los Angeles, and tonight we show you how the earth shifted, how those plates moved that might have made all the difference. Here's ABC's Kana Whitworth now.
Sirens waking the residents of Kodiak, Alaska overnight. The entire west coast on alert. Inside homes, people recorded the shaking.
Oh my gosh, it's an earthquake.
And then scrambling to get to safety.
We're leaving base now.
With just 5 minutes to spare, many of Kodiak's 6,000 residents rushing to a local high school. Despite the quake's 7.9 magnitude, the seventh largest ever recorded near Alaska, scientists say it could have been worse.
The plates slid past each other. This will cause less uplift on the sea floor, and there's less chance of a tsunami.
Had the fault line slid vertically like this, there would likely have been a large tsunami. The quake occurred on the so-called Ring of Fire, a 25,000-mile stretch of seismic activity underneath the Pacific Ocean, where 90% of all quakes happen.
And so let's get to Kana Whitworth also with us tonight. And Kana, I know there's still concern this evening because there have been dozens of aftershocks.
David, the largest one was a 5.0. And while that tsunami warning was canceled early, authorities I spoke with say this is a good reminder to everyone that they should be prepared and know their evacuation route.
Yeah, have a plan. All right, Kana Whitworth with us. Thanks, Kana.
Alert that flashed on millions of cell phones across the East Coast Tuesday morning, warning residents of all things, a tsunami. So you can't imagine the panic when so many Americans got that ominous warning, but it turned out to be a false alarm.
Another scare sent to millions of people's phones.
Yep, just 3 weeks after a false missile scare sent citizens scrambling in Hawaii, it's happened again. Some found humor in the situation. Nice to see that guy from Hawaii found a new job, tweeted one jokester. But others pointed out a real concern. Give enough false warnings, when the real one comes, no one will pay attention. Bob Strang is a Homeland Security expert.
These aren't things that are done on purpose. These are mistakes. And these are people that are trying to keep us safe. People that day in and day out are prepared to help us. And we're all human. Mistakes happen.
So how on earth was a false tsunami alert issued? Here's what happened. The National Weather Service conducts a monthly test of its warning system, which goes out to newsrooms and weather advisory services. One of those services, AccuWeather, mistook the test for an actual warning and issued the false alert.
This is an automatic process, and it was a coding error on behalf of the U.S. government, which encodes these tsunami warnings and other types of weather messages in a very specific format.
There is currently no tsunami threat.
The National Weather Service quickly sent out the all.
You guys know what this represents?
Tell us, sir.
Maybe it's the calm before the storm.
What's the storm?
Could be the calm before the storm.
What storm is
We have the world's great military people in this room, I will tell you that. And we're going to have a great evening. Thank you all for coming.
What storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out.
We thought, but new research suggests the big one could be much bigger than you think. It all has to do with two faults, the San Andreas and San Jacinto faults that could work in tandem. CBS 2's Brittany Hopper sat down with the geologist behind the study.
So this line is the San Andreas, and that's the fault that everyone's heard of.
Geophysics professor Julian Lozos at Cal State Northridge recently had his study published in the journal Science Advances, suggesting it's not just the San Andreas fault we should be worrying about.
The San Andreas by itself can produce a 7.5, and everybody thinks of the San Andreas as the bogeyman, as the big one. But the fact that the San Jacinto can be involved means, first of all, there's more ways you can get a big earthquake.
Lozos used computer models for his study, looking at an earthquake that happened in 1812 in San Juan Capistrano. He believes that earthquake likely began on the San Jacinto Fault near Mystic Lake and traveled north and then jumped to the San Andreas Fault, meaning these faults could team up again, and if that happens, it could be devastating.
Now that there's a pretty strong evidence that it happened once, we know it's physically possible and we know that it could happen again.
Professor at City College of New York. This article is stunning. Is it overstated in any way?
No, the Cascadia Fault is an earthquake waiting to happen. We know it's going to happen with an energy 30 times the maximum energy of the San Andreas Fault. So Hollywood has us brainwashed into thinking the big one is going to be in California. No, the Cascadia Fault would pack energy 30 times the energy that the San Andreas Fault can muster.
The article speaks of a liquefaction of the earth, that part of the earth will turn to liquid.
That's right. We're talking about major energy surges inside the ground that'll cause it to liquefy. We've seen that in Japan. We saw that at Fukushima, and it's almost like quicksand. One day you're walking on solid ground, the next you're falling right into a quicksand.
This earthquake would last 4 minutes or more, the rattling and the shaking, and then within 15 minutes they estimate this wall of water. In the entire inundation zone, you could have water up to 100 feet high.
That's right. And in the inundation zone, we have 70,000 people that have almost no clue as to what could happen. You know, in Japan, you have to live with earthquakes every day. Children go through tests and drills. People are conscious of this. But in the Pacific Northwest, it barely rates on the radar screen.
There's something that happens before the shaking that we can sense, the sensors can pick up. That's an early warning system that they have all over Japan, especially in the north and in the Tokyo area. They've been trying to get it pushed through, look for money for it in the Seattle-Tacoma area, nothing.
That's right. Before the earthquake actually hits, there's a compression wave that is detected by animals, for example. Animals start to act very strange, and we've seen that happen before earthquakes. And then a minute, 2 minutes later, boom. You head for the hills because there's nothing left to do except to go to high ground.
You mentioned what this sort of event has caused in history.
That's right. In the year 1700, there was a massive earthquake and tsunami which surged over Japan. And then running the videotape backwards, you can actually see that in 1700, it originated with the Cascadia Fault. And then we physicists can calculate the energy, the magnitude, the dynamics once we got these two events linked together. And that was only done in the last decade or so.
And you mentioned Mount Everest.
That's right. Mount Everest is also created by the collision of two faults, just like what we have here. The one fault going under, the other fault going over, and that created the Himalayan mountains. That created Mount Everest. That's the power packed by the subduction zone earthquake.
Okay. Averages of when things are going to happen are really not very reliable. I think they use by example, the difference between 4 and 6 is 2. I forget exactly how they did. We can't be sure exactly when this is going to happen, but we're positive it's going to happen. If you lived in the Pacific Northwest, you had little kids, would you live there?
I'd think twice. I would have to drill them, just like what they do in Japan, be part of their life in terms of having an emergency kit, where to go in case of an emergency, what to do, what frequencies to go to, and so on and so forth. And by the way, we know that this is going to happen because by simply drilling into the seafloor, we can see evidence of ancient tsunamis going back 10,000 years. And we've known that
how many over that period?
41, which means that the time between the cycles is about 240 years.
Wow.
And it's been 315 years since the last big one. Now, of course, this is not rigorous, it's not absolute. But according to this figure, we could be overdue for another big one.
Yeah, by many decades. It's nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. But what they didn't know was that they were actually standing in a giant collapsed crater of a super volcano, and one that had erupted with catastrophic force 640,000 years ago, when 250 cubic miles of heated magma and other material exploded into the air, creating an ash cloud that's been traced from Canada to Mexico to Louisiana. Based on past events, scientists say Yellowstone is overdue for another major eruption, but warn that it's impossible to predict when exactly that will happen.